Hi, Maggie. How are you?
Hello. Good.
Thank you
Nice
so
to
much.
meet. Oh, yes.
It's very nice to meet you as well. I appreciate you taking the time to join with me today.
Absolutely. I love the title of your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I just started it and it kind of came to me as I was making it and decided to stick with it.
Do you know Peter Rollins?
I don't know.
Oh, if you want to talk philosophical gospel, he's your man. He's your man.
Awesome.
You will, I predict you will fall in love. I will send you a link.
Awesome. Well, that's great. I'm looking for anybody to talk to right now that has that same mindset or likes to talk about philosophy, comparative religion type things. So certainly would be very much enjoy talking to him, I'm sure.
Yeah, he had he has what he calls pyrotheology. And the kind of
Wow.
idea is you blow up theology to get to the thing.
I see. Well, I like the juxtaposition of the name pyro theology. That's a good way.
Yeah.
That's a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
Um, well, that's great. I will certainly have to get in contact with him then. Thank you much for sharing that. Um, I found your work as I was going through this process of looking into comparative religion. I started kind of looking into Alan Watts and went from there over the past several months. And I know I had seen your speech to the Chicago Humanist Society where you kind of briefly mentioned Alan Watts and kind of how he talks about the time between the maternity ward and the crematorium.
Yes.
And I know you have a very interesting story, and I don't want you to have to recap everything, but I wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind briefly kind of explaining your experience with Christianity, how you got, kind of what brought you, why you were in it. I mean, from birth, and then what kind of brought you out of it, and then where you got to today, if you'd like.
Absolutely. So I grew up as an evangelical Christian, but I actually became more extreme than my parents were. They were rather conservative, but when I first heard the idea of hell, it absolutely changed my life forever. It's was my biggest problem throughout my childhood. I was just terrified. I was terrified for myself mainly, but also for others and what it meant if I didn't witness to somebody. Having that sort of power over eternity
Yeah.
as a child. And I have an image that's always stuck in my mind as being representative of kind of the vice that I was in, which was I was maybe like 6 or 7, and there were a bunch of girls, and we were like spinning around on the lawn. It was like, get so dizzy, and then you fall down, and then
Yeah.
it was like, ah,
Yeah.
and I was kind of having fun, and then I was like, oh, wait, what am I doing? I need to be working out my salvation. What
Oh,
am I, like, I was like, oh, um, and so I feel like that's kind of representative of, I would kind of be involved in life, and then I was like, whoa. Um,
yes.
when I when I was 19, well, I first started having sex with my fiance, uh, or my husband, because I decided we were married in God's eyes. um, but my kind of guilt over that and kind of this divided self led to a rather dramatic break, which was I was watching a film at the Student Union. I went to Cornell University in Ithaca, watching this art house flick. It was Kurosawa's movie Dreams. Has nothing ostensibly to do with the afterlife or hell. I have read articles about it that in retrospect, subliminally, he meant it to deal with fear of the afterlife.
I see.
Well, he really knocked it out of the park with me. I got it, Kurosawa.
It stuck with you.
It stuck. Oh, it hit. But there was an image, it's vignettes. It's kind of just small vignettes. And in one of them, there's a group of hikers that are going through a snowstorm, and they gradually freeze to death until they're kind of statues in the snow. And I just thought, did they accept Jesus as their personal savior? And I was like, did I accept Jesus as my personal savior? And then I heard this sound in the theater, the sound of screaming, and I realized it was coming from me.
Oh, wow.
And I checked myself into it was a evangelical Christian psychiatric facility. The thing that was problematic about it was in the title itself, which was Grace Point, where the Bible comes, psychiatry, where the Bible comes first.
Yeah.
It's a real problem.
Yeah, that is an odd way of saying that, and it kind of scary because it takes out the fact that they may stick with some actual traditional psychology. They kind of reframe psychology in the Bible as if it was a manual for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So while I was there, I did have one amazing therapist who gave me this advice that I really took to and ran with, which was sin bravely, which is the doctrine of pecca fortiter. Martin Luther, right? The brave sin.
Yes, yeah, he kind of, that was kind of your motto. That was the title of your book, and that was kind of where you came from. The title was Martin Luther's idea that he took and to sin bravely.
Yep.
Awesome.
And that really was, not that I'm cured or have gotten, rid of any repercussions, but that was the way out for me. The idea was, it was within a Christian framework, which is what I needed.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to an outside person because they would say, hell, this book, like, what? This is medieval, scare tactics.
Yeah.
So I needed somebody from within the system that was saying, for the sake of your relationship with God, you're doubting your forgiveness all the time. So what you need to do is do all the things that you want to do, that you would do if you didn't feel that you would be punished.
Yep.
So that was largely my way out, sort of. That was my first step. And then I found people like Alan Watts.
Yep.
And Joseph Campbell.
And that makes sense. I think it's kind of like the sin bravely idea allows you to know that no matter what you did, you're forgiven, kind of to feel the forgiveness or the redemption of the scriptures of the Lord in a way that, because it's almost, I've kind of been told or feel as if the suffering that people have in life, which is inherent to our existence, it's almost like if you don't have the suffering or have the failure or the falling short of what the gospel has to allow you to do, if you don't fall short of that, it's hard to understand the overpowering forgiveness of it in a way.
Yes, because it's like the good news. I feel like if you're, many different examples, but if you're a criminal and you're in jail and you have done a horrible thing and you feel vile, then what an antidote.
Yeah.
But if you're 5 years old and you're like, what? I'm terrible?
Yeah.
I didn't know I was terrible.
It's a really good point.
Died because I was so bad? What?
Yeah, you don't feel the original sin because you haven't made the original, you haven't committed that you didn't eat the apple necessarily yourself, and nor does that metaphor apply non-literally at that age. You can't really take it and use it to apply it to your innocent 5-year-old life. And so it's a hard way to start because you're already doomed, it seems like, I guess.
Yes. And putting it under, good news.
Yeah,
good news? I didn't know I was in jeopardy.
And that's like juxtaposition of the unconditional love side by side with this, like the hell house you speak on, which I talked about with one of my previous guests. It always struck me as incredibly odd just because of you want to promote this idea of unconditional love, but juxtaposing it next to this hot room filled with flames and a guy dressed up like Satan with a pitchfork doesn't really get the message across the way it should. And so then it's like you're scaring people into believing or something. And I of course found my way back to Christianity, but I didn't find it through that mechanism, and I don't intend to hope and proselytize that would be the proper way to bring people in the future.
Yeah. Well, it sets up the idea. I mean, it creates a cognitive dissonance. I mean, it's like it's unconditional love with one condition.
Yes, there's one condition, and the magical prayer thing, and not to disgrace it, but it's the way it was taught to me is as long as I say the right prayer, then I can avoid this hell house for reality. It's the right prayer, and then it never really sank with me. I didn't feel the Holy Spirit or whatever come over me when I said this magic prayer. It just seemed as if it didn't make sense that if I didn't say this prayer, this is reality after I die. But if I do say this prayer, I can just forget about whatever I do in this life. And so reading your work is incredible just because I identify with a lot of that. Eternal suffering and eternal torment side by side with unconditional love just doesn't work for me, and still doesn't. And I think it's critical that maybe people in the future that want to bring people to Christianity use some other way to show this hell and this heaven in a way that it's kind of present moment type situation.
Exactly. I'm sure you're a Rob Bell fan in some way.
I'm not never heard of it.
Oh, he's the guy. He was on the cover of Time magazine with the caption, "What if there is no hell?"
Oh, okay. See, I definitely have a couple people to look into now.
Yeah. So he was a pastor. He was a big megachurch pastor, and then he came out and he was like, "This is bullshit." And I was like, when that happened, I was like, oh. And I had been at a megachurch that he had been that he had spoken at. So it was like to have somebody leading the way out who had been and in the system. It's good. It's good.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting. I know you had talked a little bit, or I had read some of where you had talked about kind of the kingdom of God, the heaven, the hell, the reality of that being side by side is kind of present here on the planet in a certain type of way. And I identify with that simply intuitively a little bit, because that's kind of what brought me back to Christianity, was almost seeing this actual evil here on this planet in such a way that it meshed with the way Bible described evil. The analogy of Satan, the analogy of demons, the analogy of this black and white, I feel as if I was brought back to Christianity and brought back to the love of that Christianity has to say by seeing and not being able to justify how evil that I had witnessed could be here. But then I read the Bible and I was able to like, oh, there has to be this evil. But I was like, but the way the Bible describes demons, the way the Bible describes bad, the way the Bible juxtaposes the Old and the New Testament to demonstrate love versus eye for an eye kind of justice, I saw that kind of people on this planet, and that I couldn't figure out where those people could come from, because no empathy, no love, no ability to sympathize. I was like, that sounds like hell, or that sounds like what demon would be like. And so I decided to start to look into hell and say, and I never liked the idea of hell houses. And so I was like, maybe this hell is here, and there's people here who act in a way that mirrors the way the Bible talks about evil.
Preach.
And what's your thoughts on something like that? Just I don't mean to monopolize that part of the conversation.
Absolutely not. But I mean, one of my favorite quotes in the world is Milton from Paradise Lost: "The mind makes a hell of a heaven, or a heaven of a hell." And I feel like, used metaphorically to describe a present tense experience of being cut off, being inflamed. It's your own personal experience when you're cut off from love.
Yeah.
And
that's a really good way of saying it.
Thanks. And I feel like it's like we're just trying to grasp these ineffable things and put words and language to them. And boy, do I just think, if people really understood what the words literally and figuratively mean, and it's the smallest little shift. But if you just go, we're all we're all trying to say the unsayable. But as soon as we concretize or reify ideas that are not solid, and we make them, it's here and now, it's on a timeline, it's past, present. And one thing Rob Bell says that I like is, like, when people are like, is the Bible literally true? And he's like, no, it's deeper than that.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, on a deeper level, it's true. Literally. So it's a history, like, so this guy,
that trying to balance counterbalance this like triple beam balance of literal, figurative, and try to find that right where the pendulum settles, essentially, so to speak, is hard to do. And I really like the way you said it. It's like we're trying to put words to these ineffable things, these ideas, and when you don't see the ultimate love, or you're not around that, or that seems stripped out of your life, then you understand that it's the absence of that that kind of creates a hellaciousness on earth.
Absolutely.
And that's the way you said it was, we're searching for words or something of ancient types that can define this reality. And you had mentioned in some of your talks about mythology being the proper way of looking at this for you, in a way that you can see mythology. Joseph Campbell, I believe, is kind of somebody you speak on. And that's Joseph Campbell's idea, is that these are representations of human suffering and tribulation, and the rise out of that in a mythological way. And viewing it like that will allow you to kind of find your way to this a little bit better.
Absolutely. And I feel like if we could really use mythology in the way that it was meant, just as these images that kind of help guide you through. Even this is a little bit off the beaten track, but it's just what popped into my head.
Sure.
Like even the image of like the wise old woman, the crone, like, I'm getting older, I just turned 50. And, so, and I don't have children. And it's like you do kind of need, it's like you need some poetry,
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, like it's like I feel like mythology helps you look at the world through the eyes of a poet.
Yes, yeah, and you had read that poem I really enjoy. I've listened to it a few times over the last several months. Your speech to the Humanist Society in Chicago, and just because I really enjoy that poem that you had, by M.S. Merwin. Thanks. You had read that, and I just wanted to, since you brought up poetry, I agree with your point there that it's critical to have those archetypal images to represent our archetype in the world, and that's what the Bible kind of gives us, is these archetypes that people pull themselves out of the pit of despair. And that's a perfect way of saying it, is as iconography is important in Christianity and all religions, the way we demonstrate these archetypes to show people that there's a way out of these situations. And that poem that I just wanted to mention by M.S. Merwin, I listened to you read that, the first time, and I listened to it 2 or 3 times, and I was like, I know why she likes that poem.
Oh,
So it's really cool. And
I love that. And the idea that, it's almost seems sacrilegious, but the idea that you could say thanks without an entity.
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it.
That there is gratitude. And I feel like, atheists make some major errors. They talk about throwing out the baby,
Yes.
with the bet, like,
Yep. Yeah, and that's I know you went through some Eastern religions, and you practiced some Zen Buddhism and stuff like that. And they, at least in Hinduism, in their text, they have this idea of working without the expectation of reward. And when I found that quote in the Bhagavad Gita, kind of from Krishna, I realized that there's a way to work without expectation of this egoic reward. You can, if you can abandon this this thing inside your head that's telling you good job for you, if you can get rid of that nonsense, then you could see religion without a God, or with one. Like myself, finding my way back to Christianity, I could see Christ as the person I'm working to be like and working for. But if you don't have Christ, or you don't subscribe to that, working without the expectation of reward is the crux of gratitude, to me. And so I think, what was your experience in the Eastern religions and Zen Buddhism? What did you find in there that was a gold mine for you as far as how to be in the world amidst suffering?
I love that question. Meditation has really kind of revolutionized my life. Right after college, I moved into an ashram right outside of Chicago called the Himalayan Institute. And I lived there for 4 months. I studied meditation and the Hindu scriptures, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita. It was headed by a fellow that has since passed named Swami Rama, who was he was in the original Chicago Conference of Religions. But it was his place. They still exist all over the country and world. But it was my it was my saving grace. What I learned to do was to watch my mind without identifying with it,
Wow. Yeah.
and to watch my obsessions about hell and go, I'm not going to go in, I'm not going to go into them. There's the pull, there's the, because it was an addiction. It was like, if I keep thinking this through, I'll get certainty. So it was like,
Yeah.
you know, and in Buddhism, sometimes you talk about the stickiness of the mind
Yes.
instead of like alighting from one thing to another naturally. You're going, you know,
It's like the monkey mind mentality, but if the monkey gets stuck on one thing.
yeah.
So I think it's incredible that it's meditation is something that, you know, it's like a training of the mind to look at the mind instead of to identify with everything that pops into it, and to get to the crux of what is a thought, what is an emotion, how do I react. And basically what I found through meditation similar to that is to watch the mind in situations where it puts you into worse situations and try to just avoid those by observing yourself and the state of your mind in every situation. And so meditation to me seems like a skill that can be secular, it can be religious oriented, it can be whatever it is. It's almost like physical training for the muscles in the body, but for the mind. And it's kind of neglected, and hopefully it's being, you know, westernized more and more now, but it's almost like we stress this idea of physical exercise to train the body. But what's the point of a really strong body if your mind just brings you back to hell every other day?
Absolutely.
So that's
there's one Buddhist teacher that that I had for a while that talked about it being hygiene, mental hygiene. You gotta clean it out in the morning, clean it out at the night. You get cluttered, you get stuck, you get knots, you get nobules, you know.
that's a good way to say it.
And you can let it dissolve.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting. I appreciate you sharing that. I know that's the Bhagavad Gita and stuff like that really have been critical text to me, because I was trying to figure out the nature of consciousness, trying to figure out what this was all about, and the Bhagavad Gita opened this door to religion for me again, and the words of it speak really true to me. And so it's very nice to hear somebody else have found the Upanishads and found the Bhagavad Gita and understand that those people aren't against the Bible. Those people aren't necessarily for the Bible, but I guarantee you they're, like Jesus has even said, he said it, those who aren't against us, they're for us. And these people are preaching love, and they're preaching good. And so my idea with Christianity, at least finding my way back to it, is to let people understand the value and the love and the kindness that exist in these other areas of the Eastern religions, and that they're not to be ostracized away from this idea of unconditional love kind of thing.
Yes, and like the idea that, you know, Jesus came not to divide, you know, to bring, it's like we kind of stop it. It's like he didn't see a difference between Jew or Gentile, you know, slave or master, man or what. But if you're not a Christian, then yeah, you
Yes.
know.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about kind of the heaven and hell being within you sort of idea. And I found my way recently to looking at Gnostic gospels, which are the lost text.
Ah,
And
yeah.
and you had mentioned kind of like the heaven and hell being within you before in some of your things I've read and things like that. And the Gnostic gospels, however true they are, or they're as true to me as probably whatever book the Catholic Church canonized into the Bible we have today anyways. So it just because they're lost.
Right.
And Jesus says in there a lot of times that you people, you look within you, there's the kingdom of heaven. You're not God, I mean, but you are in the kingdom of heaven's here. And if you act in a way that represents me, then you can find it, kind of thing. And I think, well, I wanted to kind of ask you if you'd ever looked into the Gnostic gospels and what your thoughts on, at least esoteric and secular, really, what your thoughts might be on those if you've looked into them.
I have, but not to a huge extent.
Yeah.
But the idea that a lot of them are based on the idea of unknowing rather than knowing, you know, or, you know, even like having the Gospel of Tom, like that doubt could be at the root of something, or inquiry. You know, I love like oh my God, like the hands thing. It's such a, I mean, the images in the Bible are, you know,
Yeah,
I've got to feel. And anyway, I'm kind of going off on that, but
Yeah, but that's a good point.
I so related to, it's like they kind of give lip service in my church to, yes, doubt is a part of faith, but it's like, but you better come back to where you began.
Yeah, it comes with a caveat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the unknowing that you're talking about, I know you had kind of talked about the value of Zen before, and how you, and so Zen is an interesting school of meditation, like, and for the reasons you said, the non-deity association that it has, and they talk about this. Since you said unknowing, I feel like Zen, that's a Zen term, the beginner's mind, kind of.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you on Zen in the beginner's mind, and almost having more knowledge and not knowing. What do you think about something like that, and your roots in Zen?
I would love to talk about that. I just wanted to do a little or a little jump back, which
Yes.
is the the term unknowing is a total Zen term. You're right. There's also the Christian book, though, The Cloud of Unknowing. Which, so I feel like there is this idea within Christianity that's kind of been pushed out. But yes, beginner's mind. So I've been a member of the Zen Center of Los Angeles for probably 12 years now. It is the tradition I most resonate with. And I love that there's absolutely nothing to take on faith except for your own experience. Even other forms of Buddhism or Hinduism, there's some predictions about the afterlife. There's the reincarnation stuff. There's the Zen, Alan Watts calls it the religion of no religion.
Yes.
And it's just, it is so empty. Even like where you sit, it's very different than like going to a Thai Buddhist temple or a Chinese Buddhist temple, because it's blank and you sit, they call it wall seating or open, and you sit in front of a blank wall on your plain Zafu cushion. Everybody sits exactly the same way in exactly the same posture. We sit for 25 minutes. We have a little interlude. We walk, which is called kinhin, for 5 minutes. We're back for 25, sit for 5, 25, it is, here's what you do.
Yeah.
And as far as like a training thing, it's like, I like it because like in Los Angeles, I feel like there's this loosey-goosey mindfulness, meditation, sound bath, and I love all of it. I'm into all of it.
It's very much in vogue.
It's very in vogue and I enjoy it.
Me too.
But I don't think it's the mind training that sit every day, sit the same time, and then you really are, there's a rigor to Zen that I appreciate.
That's a really cool way of saying it, because Zen is, not to simplify it, but it's the art of doing nothing, but truly doing nothing in a way where you're not meditating with this particular meditation, trying to become a better meditator, so to speak. That's not the goal you're not trying to be a meditator for the sake of being an excellent meditator.
Nope.
And that's what I love about Zen. And it keeps you in that beginner's mind, which has been removed from Christianity, I think, because when I talk to Buddhists and I talk to Hindus, I find that they talk to me with a beginner's mind. There's this non-judgmental start to the conversation. They don't look at my tattoos or look at me and make, well, this guy's a heretic, so kick him out of the conversation before I start talking to him. Well, they talk to me like, I come into their temples, I try to be as respectful as possible, but I don't appear like the traditional Hindu practitioner, but they still don't start with this prejudge. I can just feel when I speak with them that they're speaking to me as if maybe I could offer them some piece of knowledge that they may not have. Whereas Christianity, I don't feel, when I talk to some Christians and things like that, not all, because some of them are the most loving human beings. And I think that it's the religion that I fit into the best. But I just feel like overall, there's something to be said about the way that they train the mind to always treat people like there's something to be learned from them.
That's well said. Yes, it's like going to another culture or a tradition and going, what are your treasures?
Yeah.
As opposed to going, here's what we got.
Exactly.
Yeah, that openness. I heard a great definition of meditation last week that I was like, oh, I like that. that meditation is the habituation to openness. And I was like,
Wow. Wow. That is, yeah, I've never heard that captures everything.
it's just like you train the mind. You just get this habit of open, don't crunch down, don't contract,
Yeah.
stay open. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a great, I'm gonna definitely keep that with me, that phrase, just because it's this slow idea. Openness becomes as a byproduct of meditation, essentially, because it trains the mind to not be so judgmental. So then you're open by default after that, if as long as you nurture that mind
Yep.
state. Excellent. Great way of saying that. There's something that I really enjoy that you had, since you mentioned iconography, and you had talked about the image of Michelangelo touching God on the
Oh yeah.
well, that was I identified with that dissertation or that explanation you had of it representing the human mind. Well, I was going to ask you if you'd ever thought similar things of Da Vinci's artwork of the Vitruvian Man. I had looked at that and I took it and I started looking at it, and I really think that it also represents something similar, that it represents the lobes of the brain at the same time as squaring the circle within it. And I wanted to get your opinion.
Oh no, I'd never. That's
I
fascinating.
have some artwork that I've been, or not artwork, but some thoughts on that I've been piecing together. And you said that Michelangelo, and it just kind of blew my mind. And then I looked at this for the last couple of weeks. I've been thinking the Vitruvian Man has this ultimate representation of the human mind. And I wanted to
Oh,
get your thoughts on your Michelangelo interpretation as well, and kind of juxtapose it against that. It seems like you have a similar take on some of those older artworks like that.
I would. That's interesting. I've never that it never occurred to me, but I'll definitely look into that. That's very cool. I love the idea that there's that subversive idea of the poet or the artist or the mystic that's perceiving something beneath the traditional form. So this idea that Michelangelo could have actually really had this experience as this artist, and that he did dissect, and that he did know the physical form. And the idea that within this, it's such a like, it's just the best revolutionary thing to do, to put that idea in artwork. And it wasn't a discovery I made for myself. It was probably 20 years ago. I watched a a one-man show at the Chicago International Theater Festival, where there was this Canadian guy who did a one-person show, and he put up on the screen the thing, and then put the human, and I just went, oh, it was like one of those moments that really affects. Oh, there's a word in Hungarian, Dwayne Day, and it means when a work of art hits you physically. You have a Dwayne. So that was one of those moments that I was like, oh,
Wow. Yeah, wow, I've never heard that word. I found it so strikingly great that I wasn't the only person that had looked at these ancient artwork and had seen something in it that represents the human mind, the brain, sacrifice. It's almost like the picture of the Vitruvian Man with the square, the circle. His arms are out and then they're not, and it kind of captures sacrifice, suffering, the cross, and then it divides the brain up. If you look at it, and I look at it, it has all the lobes of the brain adequately described. If you were looking from a top-down view of the brain, almost like a plan view, and in a something.
ah,
And I would just kept looking further into it, and it and then the circle and the square, and then I'm not going to go too crazy with it, but anyways, it touched me quite a bit. And hearing your story on how the Michelangelo creation of Adam touching kind of really talked to you meant a lot to me to hear you say that, because it's like, oh, so other people have seen these religious iconographies and have captured something from it similar to mine. And so I think that's really neat that you shared that.
thanks. Yeah, like the idea that there have been mystics among us all of this time, that Christianity and may have stamped out a bit. It's like the winners tell the history. Catholic Church won.
Yeah, they won. And they certainly won.
Stamped out the rest of them.
Yeah, that's a sad part too, because as I read more Christian history, I find that why is this not in there? Why is this interpreted? Oh, The Pope said it. Okay.
Yeah, the
What
Pope.
did Jesus say? I just want to know what Jesus said.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
I'm tired of I mean, I'm not blasphemizing the Catholic Church. I don't know my own hand from a hole in the ground when it comes to Christianity. I'm just trying to learn. But it just seems a little bit disheartening as I encounter. Why is science behind? Why is the Bible like this? Oh, the Catholic. Oh, okay. Catholic Church.
Yeah,
Damn
yeah.
it.
It's like, my favorite spiritual organization is the 12-step program.
Oh,
I
yes.
am
I was about to ask you about that. Yes.
so impressed with it. I just feel, I mean, the fact that there's no centralized power means that they don't have the abuse. There's no pope. There's no, just a group of people that are trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, I think I said this in the atheist speech, but the idea that you can name your own higher power based on your internal experience,
Yeah.
that's mysticism,
That's it.
um, and I've always wished that, and my best friend always says, well, you should start it, but I've always wished that there was just a universal 12-step program, that's all fragmented into
Yeah.
but I feel like the next realization is we're all addicts. We're all addicts to the different brain chemicals.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I've recently been thinking about that, the brain chemicals that we use to alter the brain chemistry. Well, it's the same thing as eating poor things because we're stressed out. You're still putting chemicals. Eventually they're broken down into atoms. Those atoms are going to affect the way your body, eventually at the primal level, you're still altering the chemistry and the operation of your body. And the heart disease kills more people than drugs anyways. So if you're clogging your arteries, same thing as using illicit substances to alter the brain and how it perceives the consciousness. And so neither of them are probably the best, but the pendulum has to settle in the middle on both of these, and integrating the shadow in a certain extent. If you're predisposed to addiction to chemicals on drugs, well, you can't just cut them all out immediately. You've got to integrate this part of your personality a little bit, maybe. But yeah, I like what you say about that. Yeah, how there's a parallel between however you put in your body is altering something, and it's not really. We're all addicts in a certain way to those kind of things.
And I feel like during this, political times, I feel like people have gotten addicted to outrage and the adrenaline that comes from feeling righteous and better, and the, oh, I would,
Yeah,
and that's a chemical. Adrenaline's a chemical just like cocaine. They're very similar.
yeah, they're releasing the same form of epinephrine and everything in your body. You're still getting the same fight or flight response you're looking for.
Yep.
And
And if we all kind of went, we're all, crack addict, Trump outrage addict, we have a similar thing.
good parallel. Yeah. And the AA thing, I think the idea of giving up their ego essentially to whatever it is. Yeah, like you said, doesn't have to be a centralized deity, but it's the idea of saying, okay, I suck right now at figuring this world out,
Yeah.
and I need a guidebook.
Yeah.
That requires essentially the same idea of death of the ego, or death of me. And now, okay, whatever you're giving that to, you're giving it to the universe, you're giving it to a book, you're giving it to whatever, but you're saying this is better than me, and I need something.
Yep.
To no more what do I want, what am I going to go find to go alter my consciousness to be better. You say, okay, well, something out there is an ultimate good, and I'm going to operate in accordance with it. And I think that's a great point you make for addicts and everybody about AA, because AA is it's got that at its core.
Absolutely. And I learned recently the word humble or humiliate, that it comes from the root Latin word for ground, so that you're coming down to ground when you're humbled, and you're going, I'm going to come to ground, and then open to something bigger. I feel like it's, yeah, my mind jumped to one different thing, but I thought of a Leonard Cohen line that I've always loved, which is, when you give up, I want to look it up. When you give up your own masterpiece, you can sink into the great masterpiece. And the idea that when you give up your ego, you can sink into something bigger, and whatever that bigger is.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can, and it's almost surrendering to to that. You're saying, look, this thing knows better than me, or at least I could strive to be more like replicating of this idea.
Yes.
That's great that you promote the AA like that, because a lot of times AA gets a bad rap or a bad name, but it does at its core do so much good. And so it personally means a lot to me that you said that, and that you talk on AA and don't. And a lot of times people disparage it, but I think it has power, and I think it has a lot of potential to help people. And so I appreciate it so much that there's not a disparaging remark against AA from you, but in fact, I think people hear what you say about AA and they're like, you know what, I've always thought it would be too regimented or something, but I think people probably go and look into AA because of the way you talk about it. I think that's so great.
I'm so impressed with it. And even the fact that it's, international. There's no abuse of power.
Yeah.
People helping each other. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's incredible. And I wanted to, just because I am not overly familiar with your work on, I know you do writing for TV shows and you write for Netflix and things like that. I wanted to get into, of course I would love to start getting into, I've read your work, your books and everything, but I haven't gotten a chance to look into your media work. And I wanted to see if you wouldn't mind talking on what you're doing right now with media and writing, so other people could see it, and then I could go and also likewise look into it.
Well, I am I'm talking in talks about Easy Street being a movie, which is nice. So
Awesome.
that's kind of starting. I am writing a pilot that I love. I'm writing it for Paramount Plus.
Wow.
And the way pilots work is, you sell your pilot idea, you write the pilot, and then they may or may not make it into a series. So who knows whether it will make it or not, but I just turned it in to my producer, and I'll just talk about it. Who knows if it'll ever get to air, but it's called Sylvia's Dead. And the premise is there are 6 patients whose beloved therapist, Sylvia, dies, and they form a support group in her absence. Yeah. And then they find out that Sylvia didn't really die.
Nice.
So cool. It's a comedy mystery with around these 6 patients.
I like it. That is neat. Comedy mystery genre combination there. That's cool. Well, I hope that pans out for you, and that sounds excellent. I'm sure that it will be just as great as everything else I've read by you. But I didn't know Easy Street was planning to be into a movie, and that's I hope that pans out. But that's just a really.
I hope it pans out. We'll see. I always say working in the industry, entertainment industry, is one of the biggest skills is hope management, where you keep your hope at enough of a level that you have the enthusiasm and energy to keep going, but not so high that when things don't work out, you're like,
yeah, kind of like planning for the best, but knowing that, basically like managing your expectations to not hurt you too much. It doesn't go right either way, but yeah, regardless of either of those panning out, I think that the work that you've done thus far, the passion, the story that you write, it's critical that it's heard, and I couldn't be more grateful to people like you to have written things like this that I can read and I can vicariously identify with in such a way that I know I'm not alone in this experience, and I'm also not alone in the beliefs that I hold and in the pathway that I followed. And it's so brilliant to me, and so important to me that you wrote your work. And I think that if you did nothing more, if you decided to retire, that what you've done thus far has impacted a lot of people, and me especially. It means a lot to me. And I have a little cousin that means a lot to me, and she's bright and brilliant. And she mentioned on me on Facebook about how she had read your memoir in book club and how it was her favorite book of the year. And I was like, see that, I wanted to share that with you because that means something to me, that it's not just helping me, it's helping people in the younger generation. It's helping teenagers, and she's a great child and overtly bright. And I thought about her when I was talking to you just now, since we were talking about your work, and she mentioned that she had read your book, and I wanted you to know that it's reaching wide demographics and it's important work that you do.
Wow. Well, that makes my day, Ethan. What a wonderful, wonderful, generous compliment. Well,
it means a lot to me for you to come on here and talk with me. And I'm I'm trying to piece together something with my philosophical gospel in a short 7-8 chapter story. I'll send you it sometime, kind of about how
Please.
it incorporates kind of the art thing we were talking about and just different icons and different things that I've found that have pushed along my thoughts on what we talked about. So I'll share that with you sometime in the future.
I would love to read that.
And I appreciate it. And I will definitely be looking into your work on Netflix. I wanted to ask you one last thing about you write for a show on Netflix. Is that correct?
Both of them aren't on anymore. I wrote for Arrested Development and Flaked, which were
Okay, great. Well, I would like to go back and watch those, and hopefully anybody else that sees this video go back.
Oh, if you check out Flaked, I wrote one of the episodes. I actually forget what it's called, but it has to do with religion.
Awesome. Okay, sweet. Great. That's excellent. I will look into Arrested Development and Flake just because I know if you have the writing in there, I'm sure I'll enjoy it. So I'm gonna proceed onward towards that. And I once again thank you so very much for coming on and talking to me. It means a lot to me, and I will be talking to you in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan.
Thanks, Maggie. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.